Possibly the most enigmatic and debated religious relic in the world, the Shroud of Turin has returned to the spotlight after a recent 3D analysis published in an academic journal. With the aid of artificial intelligence, researchers examined each fiber of the ancient fabric and, unexpectedly, complex geometric patterns began to emerge. What previously seemed like vague stains revealed themselves to be structures so precise that they could hardly be attributed to chance, leaving the team speechless before their screens. This new technological perspective has rekindled an old tension. How can a cloth over 2,000 years old simultaneously challenge science and shake deep religious convictions? Traditionally associated with the body of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion, the Shroud of Turin has always been an object of faith, but now it also stands as a huge scientific enigma. AI has not provided definitive answers, but it has broadened the questions, fueling both attempts at authentication and theories that seek to prove that it never wrapped the body of Jesus. It is a simple linen cloth, approximately 4.4 meters long by 1.1 meters wide, woven in a herringbone twill pattern. Despite the common material, its surface bears a disturbing image. The frontal and dorsal figures of a thin man, with his hands crossed over his stomach, in a posture that conveys suffering and melancholy. This image, almost like a shadow imprinted on the fabric, is at the heart of a centuries-old controversy. The observed marks disturbingly coincide with biblical accounts of the crucifixion. There are signs of wounds on the wrists and feet, a puncture wound on the side of the chest consistent with a spear, and traces on the head resembling a crown of thorns. Anatomical details reinforce the impact. The nails would have pierced the wrist bones, not the palms, consistent with supporting the body's weight, while the lateral wound has a shape and position consistent with a post-mortem blow. The fabric behaves less like a work of art and more like the silent record of a brutal execution. Bloodstains seem to follow the logic of gravity and body movement, running in different directions depending on the inclination, like a crime scene frozen in time. Nothing there suggests brushstrokes or pigments applied with aesthetic intent. Among all the details, the marks attributed to the crown of thorns are perhaps the most disturbing. Small wounds distributed across the forehead and scalp, in areas difficult to reach or illuminate. They reinforce the feeling that the shroud does not merely show an image, but preserves the physical memory of extreme suffering. Whether the result of an extraordinary event not yet understood, or the most elaborate deception in history, the Shroud of Turin continues to defy simple explanations, remaining suspended between faith, science, and mystery. This is precisely where the boundary lies between a religious relic and a scientific crime scene. No one denies the sacred importance of the shroud, but today it is no longer possible to speak of it solely from the perspective of faith. It is undeniable. This is one of the greatest scientific mysteries that humanity has yet to explain. Why does the fabric, even though thin and worn by time, still preserve such brutal marks of an execution that occurred 2 millennia ago? How did a seemingly coarse piece of linen transform into such a convincing crime scene, leading many to believe it is authentic proof of Christ's crucifixion? And moreover, why does this same cloth, when scientifically analyzed, reveal not just an image, but a bloody, silent narrative laden with history? It compels any observer to stop and wonder if modern technology can still reveal more hidden secrets in this enigma. When an old camera, in the hands of an amateur photographer named Secondo Pia, revealed the image recorded on the photographic negative, the world immediately fell silent. The face of a man emerged clearly and vividly, with a disturbing level of detail, although to the naked eye, when observing the Shroud of Turin, it was only possible to see a diffuse shadow. On May 28, 1898, Secondo Pia photographed the Holy Shroud for the first time during its exhibition in the Cathedral of Turin. Only when he developed the film did he realize that the negative was not an ordinary photograph, but contained a clearly defined positive image of the face and body. The shock was so great that he almost dropped the glass plate right there in the darkroom, later recalling the sensation that his heart had nearly stopped at that moment. The impact of this event was not limited to the church or the faithful. Pia's photograph was quickly published in newspapers such as Il Cittadino and Corriere Nazionale, then spreading to the Vatican newspaper, Osservatore Romano, amidst astonishment and suspicion. Decades later, photographer Giuseppe Enrii repeated the process and obtained results that coincided completely with those of Pia. This forced researchers to admit that the photographic negative had revealed information that the human eye could never see. From that moment on, the Shroud of Turin ceased to be just a relic kept in the church and became the focus of a global scientific investigation. The indistinct image on the fabric transformed into a concrete photographic phenomenon. The scientific community then faced an urgent question. If invisible details emerged under the light of a camera, what else could be hidden beneath a veil over 1,000 years old, awaiting modern technologies such as artificial intelligence? This is not a refined painting or a carved sculpture, but an image recorded as a photographic negative, an effect that defies simple explanation. If a 19th century camera was capable of causing such an impact, what can 21st century artificial intelligence still discover? Something deeper, more intricate, capable of paralyzing both science and faith? As soon as the light of science turned to the shroud, the mystery ceased to be limited to the image and began to involve all the physical and chemical analyses carried out with extreme rigor. In 1978, an international team of experts from the STURP research program reached a chilling conclusion. No trace of pigment, no brushstroke marks, no evidence of paint or dye applied to the ancient linen fibers was found. The image was not the work of a medieval artist. Even more impressive was the discovery that the image existed only in the outermost, ultra-thin layer of the fibers, thinner than a human hair. The fibers were not impregnated. No liquid had penetrated. No binding agent had glued the strands together, and the image did not extend to the inner layers. Micrographs showed that only the first 2 or 3 layers exhibited a faint coloration, while the lower layers remained completely intact, as if a delicate memory had been recorded only on the surface. At the same time, a study by Macron triggered intense controversy by claiming that the bloodstains had been painted with vermilion, a red pigment made of mercury sulfide mixed with a collagen binder, in a technique similar to medieval tempera. Many contested this interpretation, including colleagues from STURP, who insisted that the analyses indicated the presence of real serum and hemoglobin. The most devastating shock, however, came in 1988, when 3 independent laboratories used carbon-14 dating to determine the age of the shroud. The results indicated that the fabric dated from approximately 1260 to 1390 AD, that is, about 1200 to 1300 years after the time of Jesus, coinciding with just over a century after the shroud appeared in European records. At first glance, it seemed conclusive, but the process was far from simple. Many experts argued that the sample had been taken from a corner of the cloth, precisely the area repaired after the fire of 1532, which could have caused contamination and seriously distorted the dating. In the following years, researchers like Raymond Rogers highlighted that this repaired section was not part of the original fabric, and that vanillin, a compound that diminishes over time, was present only in the patch samples, not in the main fibers, suggesting that the core material could be much older. Furthermore, in 2019, a group of authors reanalyzed the original 1988 test data and stated that the dataset was inconsistent, lacked statistical stability, and needed to be re-evaluated. Still, in the overall professional assessment, there is not enough evidence to completely overturn the original conclusion, making it clear that it was not a simple carbon-14 dating result. This became a central issue that further fueled the debate. The moment science examined the fabric, it entered a scenario where legend and reality intertwine. There was no fake blood, no applied ink, only delicately marked surface fibers, without traces of human brushstrokes, and a dating that forced history itself to hesitate in the face of so many questions. If the shroud is truly ancient, what is the origin of the image? And, if it is merely a medieval artifact, why has no one ever managed to create another with such subtle and precise characteristics? Above all, if the carbon-14 dating result may have been affected by a patch, the mystery only deepens, further awakening our thirst for answers. And it is precisely from this point that artificial intelligence enters the scene, to open the next chapter of a journey that remains unsolved. When AI technology began scanning every pixel of the Shroud of Turin photographs, it was as if a long-sealed secret door had begun to open. The task assigned to the AI was to analyze the images across multiple spectra, transforming photographs previously visible only to the naked eye into digital datasets, so that the machine learning brain, the neural networks, could kick in, filtering frequencies and separating each hidden line beneath the fabric. The results left the scientific community astonished. Around the face and torso of the man imprinted on the shroud, strange lines of symmetry emerged, which could not be reduced to mere technical noise or random patterns in the weave of the fabric. These structures remained consistent in images captured under different light spectra, showing that it was not an accidental mark on the cloth. Even more remarkably, some AI analysis models detected signs of repetitive sequences in the fiber structure, like a kind of spatial code that only the most sophisticated algorithms can perceive. It was as if a silent geometry awaited deciphering, a mysterious graphic inscribed in the fabric without the human eye ever noticing. More importantly, these symmetrical patterns and repeating sequences are completely beyond the reach of medieval craftsmanship. How could anyone weave, paint, or print on fabric with such precision, when even modern tools, like the 1898 camera, could only capture it in the form of a negative? This was no simple artistic endeavor. It was an intricate trace, embedded within the very fibers, possibly carrying meanings that common logic cannot explain. And that's the twist. If a 19th century camera had already revealed what the human eye could not see, then today's AI not only reconstructs the image, but also unlocks an entire hidden map, forcing us to ask, could there have been a coded system inscribed on the shroud long ago, a language that we are only now beginning to understand? When AI entered the scene, peeling back a layer of the mystery of the Shroud of Turin, what was revealed was not a vague idea, but a series of shocking hypotheses, mixing science with the so-called supernatural and leaving everyone breathless. One of these hypotheses is that of corona discharge, a form of electrical discharge in the air similar to sparks, like miniature lightning, but on a more intense scale. In 2010, physicist Giulio Fanti, from the University of Padua, proposed that a corona discharge event could have imprinted the image on the outermost layers of the fabric fibers, leaving behind the strange pattern that remains visible to this day. Surprisingly, laboratory experiments have shown that this phenomenon can produce similar properties in linen samples, although no one has yet proven that it is capable of completely replicating the image of the Shroud of Turin. Furthermore, another hypothesis has suggested the action of intense ultraviolet rays or a massive burst of radiation. John Jackson and his colleagues suggested that the image could have been created by an extremely short pulse of UV radiation, emitted by a body believed to have been resurrected, like a flash, producing a three-dimensional negative reproduction without burning or discoloring the fabric. Subsequently, a group attempted to simulate this effect with lasers and, in the initial stages, confirmed that it was possible to reproduce some subtle coloration effects in linen fibers, although it is still unknown whether the entire detailed image could be recreated in this way. Even more dramatic was the shocking assertion by some scientists. This image behaves like a phenomenon, not an artifact. The expression, "behaves like a phenomenon," sounds like a statement on the borderline where science collides with the mystical, a warning that this is not simply the work of human hands, but the vestige of an event that conventional science cannot explain. Indeed, factors such as corona discharge or ultraviolet radiation far surpass the capabilities of medieval tools. How could anyone weave or imprint symmetrical details at the fiber level using only brushes or weaving techniques of the time? This question forces us to confront an even greater issue. Could the shroud be bearing the mark of an event beyond human comprehension? Some kind of energy, perhaps physical, yet unknown or supernatural. But leaving material traces would have touched each linen fiber, leaving behind an ethereal and, at the same time, extremely precise record. In a vision that seems like a technological miracle, the UV radiation or corona discharge hypotheses offer a stunning twist. If this is indeed the vestige of a unique event, then AI is not only helping us see the image, but even more powerfully, is pointing us to the very nature of that event. This forces us to ask, is this the trace of an unknown physical process or evidence of an invisible transformation that once occurred to the fabric? It is worth remembering that this is not just a debate between faith and scientific theory. It is the story of a phenomenon that forced traditional science into silence, precisely because it cannot be explained with known tools. In this sense, the shroud ceases to be merely a religious relic. It becomes an entity that demands a scientific language that perhaps doesn't even belong to the 21st century. The first light came after physical and chemical analyses, causing the shroud to cease being just a symbol. But the real turning point came with AI, the tool that didn't choose sides between true or false, but focused on the delicate layers of data never before revealed. In a study by Thomas McAvoy, published in 2025 in the International Journal of Humanities, this is discussed. Journal of Archaeology. AI was applied to processing images of the Shroud of Turin using PCA, principal component analysis, and signal processing techniques to separate the luminosity, revealing hidden information behind the negative image. The results not only identified that the light intensity contained almost all the necessary data, but also reconstructed the three-dimensional nature of something that previously only NASA or space scientists could do with photos of Mars. And it didn't stop there. With data space modeling tools, AI made it possible for the first time to reconstruct an internal map of the shroud. The light seemed to pass through each linen fiber, and each weaving pattern emerged clearly, like a mysterious map. An article published on the Academia Edu website reported that AI restored symmetries previously hidden by folds or marks of time, as well as helping to identify anatomical details that had been distorted, revealing a clearer portrait of the face and body on the shroud. In this context, we suddenly realize that AI does not judge truth or falsehood. It simply sifts through each layer of data, extracting from light and fibers signals that the human eye, camera, or traditional techniques could never see. AI acts as a bridging language between the shroud and human understanding, decoding silent traces by converting them into analyzable datasets. Here we are forced to raise an open question. Are these patterns and weaves the language of a phenomenon that no one yet understands, or could they be vestiges of a lost technology? Could the shroud have been created from a special mold, as Maurice once proposed? A shallow, low-relief sculpture made to look ancient, combined with some method that caused the image to be imprinted on the fabric to this day? But AI reveals something different. The symmetries and anatomical precision cannot be explained by the simple touch of medieval human hands. This is the emotional crux of the matter. If AI is just a tool, it is still revealing a larger story. The story of a physical trace that has survived the passage of time, stored in a form of data that science is only now beginning to grasp. A language encoded in light, fiber, and time. A mysterious mark strong enough to make science and faith pause in the same place, and subtle enough to awaken the deepest curiosity. Could artificial intelligence finally be opening a door to a secret that no one has ever dared to cross? Since 1898, when Secondo Pia's negative photograph revealed an unexpectedly clear face on the Shroud of Turin, this relic has never lost its power to intrigue. It is a cloth about 4 meters long, woven in herringbone twill, displaying the figure of a crucified man that has remained at the center of intense debate for over a century. Over time, science has applied virtually every tool available: chemical and physical analyses, carbon dating, lasers, ultraviolet radiation hypotheses. None of them, however, has been able to resolve the controversy. On the contrary, each attempt seems to have deepened the enigma even further, transforming the Shroud of Turin into a veritable intellectual labyrinth, where every answer opens up new questions. The arrival of AI was not intended to declare the shroud true or false. Its role was different: to silently remove layer after layer of data, examining each fiber with a rigor impossible for the human eye. In this process, unexpected symmetries, repetitive patterns, and intriguing structures emerged, as if some form of information had been recorded there thousands of years ago. For many scientists, these results point to an anomalous phenomenon, beyond what any known medieval technique could produce. For the faithful, they reinforce the idea of a supernatural event, in which light, energy, and life converged in a single instant. Between the laboratory and faith, however, the central question remains untouched. What, after all, is the Shroud of Turin? A physical vestige of a miracle that shaped the history of humanity? Proof of a lost technology, far ahead of its time? Or simply an extraordinary natural phenomenon, still unexplained, whose coincidence defies our understanding? It is precisely in this undefined boundary that the mystery becomes most fascinating. After more than a century of photographs, studies, and disputes, the Shroud of Turin continues to challenge not only science and religion, but also modern humanity's confidence in its own certainties. And perhaps that is why it still captivates us. Because each new discovery does not end the debate, it only restarts it on a deeper level.